everyone. I'd like to continue the previous story. I hope you'll keep enjoying it. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you, the priest said thoughtfully. In a way, El Kuki teaches children about consequences, that their actions have results, that misbehavior leads to trouble. It is moral instruction through storytelling. Precisely, Father, Don Miguel said, and it is much older than Christianity. Indigenous peoples had their own versions of creatures that punished wrongdoing. The Aztecs had the Chipactli. The Maya had various demons and spirits. The human need to teach children right from wrong through fear is universal. As my children grew older, they stopped believing in El Cucuy. Carlos was perhaps 8 when he announced to me, "Papa, I know El Cucuy is not real. You and Mama made him up to scare me." And I said, "Oh, are you sure?" And he hesitated, not quite as confident as he wanted to appear. That is when I knew I had done it right. He was old enough to question, but young enough to still have that little bit of doubt. One of the farmers spoke up. "My daughter, she is 7 now, and she still believes. Just last week, she refused to go to bed because she was convinced El Cucuy was under her bed. I had to check, move the bed away from the walls, show her there was nothing there. Only then would she sleep." "Ah, and that is good," Don Miguel said kindly. "She will grow out of it when she is ready. Childhood should have some magic in it, even if that magic is a little bit frightening. It makes the world more interesting, more vivid. Better to believe in El Cucuy than to grow up too fast to lose that sense of wonder and possibility." The young bride asked, "Do you think children today still believe in El Cucuy? With television and movies and all the modern things?" Don Miguel considered this. "I think El Cucuy evolves with the times. Perhaps modern children imagine him differently, give him new characteristics. But the core idea remains. The nameless fear, the consequence of misbehavior, the thing that lurks in the dark, that will always resonate with children no matter how modern the world becomes. In fact, I think children today might need El Cucuy more than ever. The world is so safe for them in many ways, so protected and supervised. They never face real consequences, real danger. El Cucuy provides that small dose of healthy fear, that reminder that the world is not always safe, that they need to be careful and listen to their parents." He smiled. "Of course, I am an old man. What do I know about modern children? But I see my grandchildren, and they are not so different from how I was at their age. They still get scared of the dark. They still need reassurance. They still respond to stories of monsters and heroes. Human nature does not change so quickly." The merchant's wife said, "I think you are right. My grandson is 6, and he is obsessed with dragons and monsters. He wants to hear scary stories, but then he needs his mother to check under the bed before he can sleep. It's the same pattern, generation after generation." "Exactly," Don Miguel said. "And that is beautiful in its way. It connects us to our ancestors, to everyone who has ever been a child afraid of the dark, everyone who has ever been a parent trying to keep their child safe. El Cucuy is part of that long chain of human experience." He stretched and yawned. "You know, when I told my children about El Cucuy, I would always end with the same reassurance. I would say, El Kukui only comes for children who are alone and afraid. But you are not alone. You have Mama and Papa. You have your brothers and sisters. You have God watching over you. As long as you stay close to us, as long as you are good and kind and brave, El Kukui cannot touch you. And I would see the relief in their eyes. The fear would ease, replaced by a sense of security. They learn that the way to defeat monsters is not to hide, but to stay connected to those who love you. That is a valuable lesson. The room was quiet for a moment, everyone lost in their own memories of childhood fears and parental comfort. Then the young husband said, "Abuelo, you've told us so many stories tonight. Each one is better than the last. How many more do you have?" Don Miguel laughed. "Oh, my young friend, I could tell stories until the sun rises and beyond. Mexico is old, and its memory is long. There are 1,000 tales, 1,000 legends, and I know at least 100 of them. But I see that some of you are growing tired. Perhaps it is time for a break, for more chocolate, for a moment to rest before I continue." But the chorus of protest was immediate. "No, no, please continue. We are not tired. Just one more, Abuelo, please." Don Miguel held up his hands in mock surrender. Very well, I will tell you one more tonight. But after this, I insist we all rest. Even an old storyteller needs to pause and breathe." He settled back into his chair, his eyes gleaming. "Let me tell you about El Cadejo, the spirit dogs who walk the lonely roads at night, one white and one black, one good and one evil, both watching over travelers and judging their hearts. This is a story from my youth, when I was traveling alone and learned that not all protectors are human." The fire crackled, the rain had stopped entirely now, and the travelers leaned forward eagerly, ready for one more tale before the night ended. "El Cadejo," Don Miguel began, his voice taking on a reverent tone, "is a legend that comes to us from Central America, from Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras. But it has traveled north over the years, carried by storytellers and migrants, until it became part of Mexican folklore as well. And I am grateful for that, because El Cadejo saved my life." He had everyone's full attention now. "This happened when I was 22 years old, before I met Rosa. Before I settled down to run this inn, I was young and foolish and thought I knew everything. I had decided to travel, to see the world beyond my village. I had saved a little money from working on my uncle's ranch, and I set out with a pack on my back and adventure in my heart. I traveled south down through the mountains, heading toward Guatemala. I wanted to see the old Maya ruins, wanted to experience something beyond the small world I'd always known. For weeks, I walked and rode on wagons when I could catch a ride, sleeping under the stars or in cheap hostels when I found them. One evening, I was walking alone on a remote mountain road. It was getting late, the sun sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I knew I should find a place to stop for the night, but I was young and impatient. The next town was only a few miles ahead, or so I thought. I decided to push on. Don Miguel's expression grew somber. As darkness fell, I realized I had made a mistake. The road became harder to see, winding through dense forest. There were no lights, no houses, no signs of human habitation, just endless trees and the sounds of night animals, owls hooting, insects chirping, things rustling in the undergrowth. I began to feel uneasy. The forest pressed in on both sides of the road, and I had the distinct sensation of being watched. Several times I stopped and looked around, but I saw nothing, just shadows and darkness. I told myself I was being foolish, that there was nothing to fear, but my heart beat faster and I walked more quickly. Then I heard footsteps behind me. The room was utterly silent. At first I thought it might be another traveler, someone else on the road, but when I stopped, the footsteps stopped. When I walked, they resumed, always keeping pace, always the same distance behind me. I called out, "Who is there? Show yourself." But there was no answer, just the steady pad, pad, pad of feet on the dirt road. I began to run, not sprinting, but walking very fast, my pack bouncing on my shoulders. The footsteps behind me sped up as well, matching my pace. My fear grew. I thought of bandits, of wild animals, of all the warnings my mother had given me about traveling alone. I rounded a bend in the road, and there, standing directly in my path, was a man. He was tall and rough-looking, with a machete hanging from his belt and a cruel smile on his face. 2 other men stepped out of the forest behind him, blocking the road. I was trapped. The young wife gasped. Don Miguel nodded grimly. The leader spoke. "Well, well, a young traveler all alone. How convenient. You will give us your money and anything else of value you carry. Do it quickly, and we will let you live. Resist, and we will take it from your corpse." I was terrified, but I tried to stay calm. I reached for my pack, pretending to comply. My mind raced. I had a small knife, but it would be useless against 3 men with machetes. I considered running, but where would I go? Into the dark forest where I could easily get lost. Just as I was about to surrender my belongings, I heard something. A low growl from the darkness behind the bandits. They heard it too. The leader spun around, his hand on his machete. "What was that?" he hissed, and then it appeared. A dog, but not just any dog. This dog was huge, the size of a calf, with shaggy white fur that seemed to glow in the darkness. Its eyes were kind but fierce, intelligent and aware. It stepped onto the road between me and the bandits, and it growled again, a sound that made my bones vibrate. Don Miguel's voice dropped to a whisper. The bandits stared at the white dog, and I saw fear flash across their faces. "El Cadejo Blanco," one of them whispered. "The white Cadejo." The leader tried to maintain his bravado. "It is just a dog. We can kill a dog." But even as he said it, he took a step backward. The white dog's growl intensified. It lowered its head, and I could see powerful muscles bunching under its fur, ready to spring. The bandits looked at each other, and without another word they turned and ran into the forest. I could hear them crashing through the undergrowth, branches snapping, their curses and shouts fading into the distance. I stood frozen, my heart hammering. The white dog turned to look at me. Its eyes were gentle now, almost kind. It tilted its head as if asking, "Are you all right?" I nodded, unable to speak. The dog wagged its tail once, a slow, deliberate movement, and then it turned and began to walk down the road, away from the bandits toward the town I had been heading for. I followed. I did not even think about it. I just walked behind this enormous white dog, trusting it completely. We walked for perhaps 2 miles, the dog always staying about 10 paces ahead of me. Once or twice I tried to catch up to get closer, but it maintained the distance, leading but not allowing me to touch it. Finally, we crested a hill, and I could see lights below. The town. The white dog stopped and looked back at me one more time, and then, I swear to you on everything holy, it simply faded away, like mist evaporating in the morning sun. One moment it was there, solid and real. The next moment it was gone. The travelers sat in stunned silence. Finally the priest spoke. "You encountered El Cadejo Blanco, the good spirit dog." "I did," Don Miguel confirmed. "When I reached the town, I found a small cantina still open and stumbled inside. The owner took one look at my face and poured me a tequila. I drank it in one gulp and asked for another. Then I told him what had happened." The old man nodded, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "El Cadejo protected you," he said. "You are very fortunate. The white dog only appears to those who need protection, those who are in true danger. He guards travelers on lonely roads, keeps them safe from bandits and wild animals and other dangers. Ah, but there is also a black Cadejo," the old man continued. "El Cadejo Negro, he is the opposite, the evil twin. The black dog leads travelers astray, lures them off the path into danger. If you see a black dog on a lonely road, you must not follow it. No matter how friendly it seems, it will lead you to ruin." Don Miguel took a sip of his chocolate. "I stayed in that town for 3 days, recovering from my fright, and I thought long and hard about what had happened. I could have been killed that night. The bandits were serious, and I had nothing to defend myself with. But El Cadejo Blanco had appeared, had driven them away, had led me to safety. Why? What had I done to deserve such protection?" The merchant asked. "Did you ever see it again?" "No," Don Miguel said. "Never again. But I have felt its presence several times over the years. When I have been in danger, when I have felt afraid or lost, I have sensed something watching over me. A guardian, unseen but real. I believe El Cadejo Blanco has been with me all my life, protecting me in ways I do not fully understand. The legend of El Cadejo teaches us something important, that we are not alone in this world, that there are forces, spirits, beings, call them what you will, that watch over us. Sometimes they appear as white dogs, sometimes as other things, but they are there, guiding us, protecting us, if we are open to seeing them," the old woman said softly. "I like that idea, that we have guardians we cannot see. Catholics believe in guardian angels," the priest added. "Perhaps El Cadejo is simply another name for the same thing. God's protection manifesting in forms we can understand and relate to." "Perhaps," Don Miguel agreed. "Or perhaps there are many kinds of guardians working in different ways, all serving the same purpose, to keep us safe, to guide us home." He looked around at his guests. "But remember, there is also El Cadejo Negro, the dark dog, the trickster, the one who leads you astray. I have heard stories of travelers who followed a black dog and ended up lost in the wilderness for days, or who were led to the edge of cliffs, or who vanished entirely, never to be seen again. How do you tell the difference? The young husband asked. How do you know if it is the white dog or the black dog? The white dog has kind eyes, Don Miguel said. Even when it is fierce, defending you from danger, its eyes are warm. The black dog has eyes that are cold, calculating, cruel. The white dog leads you toward safety, toward light and civilization. The black dog leads you away from the path, into darkness and wilderness. But most importantly, you feel the difference in your heart. The white dog makes you feel calm, protected, safe. The black dog makes you feel uneasy even when it seems friendly. Trust your instincts. They will tell you which is which. One of the farmers said, "My grandmother used to say that dogs can see spirits, that they bark at things we cannot see because they perceive the other world. Maybe El Cadejo is what they are barking at." "Very likely," Don Miguel said with a smile. "Dogs are sensitive to things we humans miss. They see, hear, smell, and sense things beyond our perception. It makes sense that they would be aware of spirit dogs like El Cadejo. After my encounter, I developed a great love and respect for dogs. When Rosa and I settled here at the inn, we always kept dogs. Not just for protection, though they were good at that, but for companionship, for the sense of connection to El Cadejo Blanco and the protection it represents. We had a dog named Blanco, actually, a large white mixed breed, gentle and loyal. He lived for 15 years, and when he died, I buried him behind the inn with full honors. I like to think he was a little piece of El Cadejo, sent to watch over us in physical form." The young wife wiped her eyes. "That is beautiful, abuelo. I will never look at dogs the same way again." "Good," Don Miguel said warmly. "They deserve our respect and love. They have been our companions for thousands of years, protecting us, guiding us, loving us unconditionally. El Cadejo is just the spiritual expression of that bond." He glanced toward the window. The rain had stopped completely now, and through the glass the first hints of dawn were visible, a pale gray lightening of the eastern sky. "My friends, the night is almost over. The storm has passed and soon the sun will rise. I have one more story to tell you before we rest, before you continue on your journeys. It is the most important story, the one that ties all the others together. Let me tell you about Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the god who gave us culture, wisdom, and hope. And then I will send you off into the new day with full hearts and tired but happy minds. Everyone settled in for this final tale, sensing that it would be something special, something that would make sense of all the other stories they had heard throughout the long night. Don Miguel looked into the dying fire, added one more log to bring the flames back to life, and began his last story of the night. "Quetzalcoatl," Don Miguel said, and the name rolled off his tongue like poetry, like music. "The feathered serpent, the most important god of the ancient Mexicans, revered by the Toltecs, the Aztecs, the Maya. A god unlike any other because he loved humanity and wanted to lift us up, to make us more than we were. He settled deeper into his chair, his voice taking on the cadence of ancient storytelling. In the beginning, according to the old tales, there was nothing but darkness and water. The gods existed, but they were restless, unsatisfied. They wanted to create something to fill the void with life and beauty. So they created the earth, pulling it up from the waters, shaping mountains and valleys, filling it with plants and animals. But something was missing. The gods wanted beings who could appreciate their creation, who could worship them and give them meaning. So they tried to create humans. The first attempt was made from mud, but the mud people were weak and formless, dissolving in the rain. The second attempt was made from wood, but the wooden people had no souls, no hearts, no ability to truly feel or think. They were destroyed in a great flood. Then Quetzalcoatl, who was the god of wind and wisdom, of learning and life itself, had an idea. He traveled to Mictlan, the underworld, the realm of the dead. It was a dangerous journey. Mictlan was ruled by Mictlantecutli, the death god, a skeletal figure who did not take kindly to visitors. Don Miguel's voice dropped dramatically, but Quetzalcoatl was brave and clever. He approached Mictlantecutli and said, "Great lord of the dead, I have come to ask for a gift. Give me the bones of the ancient people, those who came before, and I will use them to create new humans, better humans, who will honor both life and death." Mictlantecutli was suspicious. "Why should I give you these bones? What will you do with them?" Quetzalcoatl explained his plan, and the death god, intrigued, agreed. But he set a challenge. "You must circle my realm 4 times, blowing this conch shell trumpet as you go. If you can do this, the bones are yours." Quetzalcoatl took the conch shell, but he quickly realized it had no holes, no way to make sound. It was a trick, but Quetzalcoatl was clever. He called upon worms to bore holes in the shell, and he called upon bees to enter the shell and make it vibrate with their buzzing. Thus, he created music from the shell, fulfilling the challenge. The travelers listened, enchanted. Don Miguel continued. Mictlantecutli had to honor his word. He gave Quetzalcoatl the bones of the ancient people. But as Quetzalcoatl fled the underworld carrying his precious cargo, Mictlantecutli changed his mind and sent spirits to chase him. Quetzalcoatl ran, but he stumbled and fell. The bones shattered into different sizes, some large, some small. This is why humans come in different heights, the legend says. Quetzalcoatl gathered all the broken bones and brought them to Tamawanchan, the paradise of the gods. There, he and the other gods ground the bones into powder. Then Quetzalcoatl did something extraordinary. He pierced his own flesh and let his blood drip onto the bone powder, mixing it together. From this mixture, moistened with the blood of a god, the new humans were created. We are made from the bones of the dead and the blood of the divine. We carry both within us. The priest leaned forward. That is a beautiful creation story. It speaks to the dignity of human beings, that we are made from divine sacrifice. Exactly, Don Miguel said warmly. And Quetzalcoatl did not stop there. Once humans were created, he devoted himself to teaching us, to giving us the tools we needed to build civilization. He taught us agriculture, how to plant and harvest corn, the sacred grain that sustains our people. He taught us the calendar, the mathematics of time, so we could track the seasons and the movements of the stars. He taught us writing, so we could record our history and our wisdom. He taught us architecture, so we could build great cities and temples. He taught us metallurgy, weaving, pottery, all the arts and crafts that make life richer and more beautiful. He even taught us ethics, how to live good lives, how to be just and kind and honorable. Don Miguel's eyes shone with passion. But Quetzalcoatl's fellow gods were not all happy with his actions. Tezcatlipoca, the god of night and sorcery, was jealous. He believed humans should remain ignorant, should serve the gods without question. The fact that Quetzalcoatl was elevating humanity, giving them knowledge and power, offended him. So Tezcatlipoca devised a plan. He went to Quetzalcoatl in disguise and offered him a gift, a mirror. "Look," he said, "see your true form." When Quetzalcoatl looked in the mirror, he was horrified. He saw himself not as the beautiful plumed serpent, but as old and ugly and decrepit. It shattered his confidence, his sense of self. Tezcatlipoca, still in disguise, offered comfort. "I have something that will make you feel better," he said, and he gave Quetzalcoatl puki, the fermented drink made from agave. Quetzalcoatl, in his distress, drank deeply. He became drunk, lost control, and did things he regretted. Some versions say he broke his vows of celibacy. Others say he simply made a fool of himself. Either way, when he sobered, he was filled with shame. The room was silent, everyone absorbed in the tragic turn of the story. Quetzalcoatl, overwhelmed by his shame and feeling unworthy of his position, decided to leave. He gathered his followers and traveled east toward the sea. Along the way, he continued to teach, leaving gifts of knowledge in every place he stopped. When he finally reached the ocean, he did one of two things, depending on which version of the story you believe. In one version, he built a raft of serpents and sailed away across the water toward the east, toward the rising sun. In another version, he lit a great funeral pyre, stepped into the flames and burned himself. But his heart rose from the ashes and ascended to the sky, where it became the morning star Venus, the brightest light in the dawn sky. Before he left, Quetzalcoatl made a promise. "I will return," he said. "In a future age I will come back to you. Watch for me in the east, in the place where the sun rises. I will return and restore the golden age." Don Miguel paused, letting the weight of this promise settle. Centuries later, when Hernan Cortés arrived from the east, sailing across the ocean in great ships, the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma wondered if this might be Quetzalcoatl returning as promised. The timing was right, according to the calendar. The direction was right, from the east. Cortés even had a beard, and Quetzalcoatl was one of the few Mesoamerican gods depicted with facial hair. This hesitation, this wondering if Cortés might be divine, contributed to the fall of the Aztec Empire. It was a tragic irony. The God who loved humanity and gave us everything was used as a tool for our conquest. The merchant said sadly, "So Quetzalcoatl's legacy was twisted and used against his own people." "In that moment, yes," Don Miguel acknowledged. "But Quetzalcoatl's true legacy is much greater and more enduring than that. Look around you. We still plant corn, still follow the calendar he taught us, still tell his stories. The pyramids and temples built in his honor still stand testaments to the civilization he inspired. More than that, Quetzalcoatl represents the best of what we can be. He represents wisdom, compassion, the desire to lift others up rather than keep them down. In a pantheon full of gods who demanded blood sacrifice, who were often cruel and capricious, Quetzalcoatl stood out as different. Some legends say he opposed human sacrifice, that he wanted offerings of flowers and butterflies instead. The priest nodded thoughtfully. There are some Christian scholars who believe the legend of Quetzalcoatl was a pre-Christian preparation, a foreshadowing of Christ, a divine being who sacrifices himself for humanity, who promises to return. The parallels are striking. They are, Don Miguel agreed. Whether that is coincidence or something deeper, I cannot say. But I will tell you this. When I was young, struggling to reconcile my indigenous heritage with my Catholic faith, Quetzalcoatl helped me. I saw in him a bridge between the two worlds. A god who loved humanity, who taught and sacrificed and promised redemption. That sounds like Christ, but it also sounds uniquely Mexican, rooted in our own ancient soil. I came to believe that truth can wear many faces, speak many languages. The God who created us and loves us might reveal himself differently to different peoples in ways they can understand and connect with. Quetzalcoatl was our revelation, our way of understanding divine love and wisdom, and that is sacred, worthy of respect, the old woman said quietly. My grandmother used to tell me stories of Quetzalcoatl. She said he would return someday and bring back the golden age when there was no hunger, no war, no suffering. I used to dream about that as a child. We all dream of it, Don Miguel said gently. Every culture has its version of the golden age, the paradise lost, the promise of restoration. For Christians, it is the second coming and the kingdom of heaven. For the ancient Mexicans, it was Quetzalcoatl's return. The details differ, but the hope is the same. That somehow, someday, the world will be healed, justice will prevail, and we will live in peace and abundance. Whether Quetzalcoatl literally returns or not, I think we can honor his legacy by embodying his values, by teaching others, by being generous with our knowledge and wisdom, by creating beauty, by advancing civilization, by treating each other with kindness and respect. In that way, Quetzalcoatl returns a little bit every time we choose to be better than we are, to lift others up, to sacrifice something of ourselves for the common good. The young husband said, I never thought of mythology that way, as something that still matters, that still teaches us how to live. That is the power of stories, Don Miguel said. They are not just entertainment, not just history. They are living wisdom passed down through generations, teaching us how to be human. Quetzalcoatl's story teaches us to value knowledge, to be generous, to strive for excellence, to believe in redemption and return. Those lessons are as relevant today as they were 1,000 years ago. He looked around at his guests, at their tired but attentive faces. I have told you many stories tonight. Stories of sorrow and joy, of fear and courage, of gods and monsters and ordinary people caught up in extraordinary circumstances. Each story is different, but they all share something in common. They remind us that we are part of something larger than ourselves, part of a culture, a history, a web of meaning that stretches back thousands of years and forward into a future we cannot see. La Llorona teaches us about the consequences of betrayal and the enduring power of grief. El Chupacabra reminds us that mystery still exists in our rational world. Dia de los Muertos shows us how to honor our dead and find comfort in their continued presence. The Negual connects us to the natural world and the animals we share it with. La Malinche asks us to see complexity and compassion even in those we are taught to hate. El Cucuy shows us how fear can protect as well as harm. El Cadejo assures us that we are watched over and guided, even when we feel alone. And Quetzalcoatl, he gives us hope that we can be better, that knowledge and wisdom can elevate us, that the divine loves us and wants us to thrive. His voice grew soft. These are our stories. Mexican stories born from this land and its people. They are gifts from our ancestors, and it is our responsibility to keep them alive, to pass them on to the next generation. Because when we lose our stories, we lose ourselves. We forget who we are, where we came from, what we value. So remember what you have heard tonight. Tell these stories to your children and grandchildren. Keep them alive. And when you do, you honor everyone who told them before you, all the way back to the beginning, to the first storyteller sitting by the first fire, trying to make sense of the mystery and beauty and terror of being alive. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. Outside, the sky was definitely lighter now, the stars fading as dawn approached. The storm was a distant memory, and the world was fresh and clean, washed by the rain. Don Miguel stood slowly, his old bones creaking. My friends, it has been a long night and I am tired, but it has been a good night. Thank you for listening, for asking questions, for sharing your own stories and memories. You have made this old man very happy. The travelers began to stir, gathering their belongings, preparing to continue their journeys. But there was a reluctance in their movements, a desire to prolong this magical time just a little longer. Don Miguel smiled, understanding. Go now, with my blessing. The roads will be muddy, but passable. The sun will rise soon and warm you. Travel safely, and may your own stories be worth telling someday. One by one, they thanked him, some with handshakes, some with embraces. The young couple pressed coins into his hand, more than the cost of their meal and shelter. The old woman kissed his weathered cheek. The priest made the sign of the cross over him, and then they were gone, out into the gray dawn, their voices fading as they walked away from the inn. Don Miguel stood at the door, watching them go. Then he turned and looked at his inn, at the dying fire, at the empty chairs where his guests had sat. He felt the weight of the night, the stories told, the connections made, and he felt Rosa's presence as he always did. Another good night, my love, he whispered to the empty room. They listened well, they understood. The stories live on. From somewhere deep in his heart, he felt her reply. A warmth, a comfort, a confirmation. Yes, Miguel, Well done." He smiled, banked the fire, and climbed slowly up the stairs to his room, ready for a few hours of well-earned rest before the next travelers arrived, before the next stories needed to be told. The Inn of Forgotten Tales would be ready for them, as it always was, and Don Miguel would be there, waiting, his memory full of legends and his heart full of love for the tradition he served. But Don Miguel did not go upstairs just yet. He stood by the window, watching the sky lighten from gray to pale blue, watching the world wake up. The mountains in the distance emerged from shadow, their peaks touched by the first rays of the rising sun. Mist rose from the valleys like the breath of sleeping giants. Birds began to sing, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. He thought about the travelers, each one carrying away the stories he had shared. He imagined them stopping at other inns in other towns and retelling the tales, perhaps not exactly as he had told them. Stories change in the retelling, adapt to new listeners, new contexts. But that was all right. That was how stories stayed alive, by being flexible, by meeting each new generation where they were. The young couple would probably tell their children about La Llorona someday, using it as both warning and comfort. The merchant and his son might share the tale of El Chupacabra around campfires during their travels, debating what it meant, what was real. The old woman would build her ofrenda for Dia de los Muertos with renewed purpose, thinking of Don Miguel and Rosa and the beautiful tradition they represented. The priest would perhaps see Quetzalcoatl in a new light, as a bridge between faiths rather than a rival to his own beliefs. And they would all remember this night, this storm, this inn where an old man had welcomed them and filled their hours with wonder. Don Miguel felt a deep satisfaction. This was his purpose, his calling, not just to provide shelter and food, though those were important, but to be a keeper of memory, a guardian of stories, a link in the long chain stretching from the past into the future. He walked slowly to the hearth and looked at the glowing embers. He thought about all the fires that had burned in this spot over the years. Hundreds, thousands, each one warming different people, lighting different faces, witnessing different conversations. The inn had seen births and deaths, marriages and divorces, celebrations and mournings. It had sheltered traders and pilgrims, soldiers and scholars, the rich and the poor. And through it all there had been stories. Don Miguel knelt with some difficulty and carefully placed a few small pieces of kindling on the embers. He blew gently, coaxing the fire back to life. Flames flickered, caught, grew. He added larger pieces of wood, building the fire up again. Not for warmth now, but for continuity. The fire must never go completely cold. That was his rule, his tradition. As long as the inn stood, as long as he drew breath, there would be fire in this hearth. He settled into his chair one more time, not ready yet to leave this space, this room that held so much meaning. His mind drifted over the stories he had told tonight, each one precious, each one carrying wisdom hard-won over centuries. La Llorona, teaching us that love twisted by betrayal becomes something dark and dangerous, but also that grief is a kind of love that refuses to let go, that mothers and children are bound by ties that not even death can sever, and that we must be careful with hearts, both our own and others, because once broken, they can shatter into pieces sharp enough to cut for generations. El Chupacabra, reminding us that the world is vast and strange, that not everything can be explained, that mystery is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be respected. That fear of the unknown has kept humans safe for millennia, and we should not be too quick to dismiss what we do not understand. Dia de los Muertos and Rosa's memory, showing us that death is not an ending but a transformation, that love continues beyond the grave, that we honor our dead not with sorrow alone, but with celebration, with food and flowers and stories, welcoming them back for one precious day each year. The Nagual and Doña Remedios, connecting us to the ancient wisdom that saw humans and animals as kin, as partners in existence, that power without responsibility is corruption, and that magic, real or imagined, makes the world more beautiful and meaningful. La Malinche, asking us to see beyond simple judgments of good and evil, to understand that people in impossible situations make impossible choices, that history is written by victors and often erases the voices of those who suffered most, that compassion is more valuable than condemnation. El Cucuy teaching us that fear has its place in childhood and in life, that it can protect as well as harm, that the monsters we create for our children are really lessons in disguise, preparing them for a world that can be dangerous, giving them tools to navigate it safely. El Cadejo, assuring us that we are not alone, that there are guardians and guides, whether we call them angels or spirit animals or protective forces, that the universe is not indifferent to our struggles, that help comes when we need it most, though not always in the forms we expect. And Quetzalcoatl giving us hope that humanity can be elevated, that knowledge and wisdom and art and culture are gifts worth pursuing, that sacrifice for the greater good is noble, that even gods can fail and yet their legacy can endure, that the promise of return and redemption is woven into the very fabric of existence. Don Miguel smiled. 9 stories, 9 lessons, 9 threads in the great tapestry of Mexican culture, and he was just one of countless storytellers who had kept these threads bright and strong, passing them on, adding his own experiences and interpretations, making them relevant for his time while honoring their ancient origins. He heard footsteps outside. The door opened, and a young man entered, shaking the morning dew from his cloak. He looked around the inn with tired eyes. "Good morning," he said. "I am sorry to arrive so early. I have been walking all night. Is there a room available, and perhaps some breakfast?" Don Miguel rose to greet him, his weariness forgotten. "Of course, my friend. Welcome to La Posada de Cuentos Olvidados. Come, sit by the fire, warm yourself. I will make you chocolate, the good kind, made the old way. And I have fresh bread and eggs and beans." The young man sank gratefully into a chair. "Thank you, grandfather. You are kind. This inn, it has a good feeling, peaceful. It is a place of stories," Don Miguel said, moving to the kitchen to prepare food. Many tales have been told here. Many travelers have passed through. Each one leaves something behind, takes something away. That is what makes it special. The young man looked around with interest. Stories? What kind of stories? Don Miguel paused, a smile playing at his lips. He looked at this new traveler, this new listener, and felt the familiar stirring of anticipation. Another night was coming. Another storm would surely arrive. Another opportunity to share the old tales. All kinds, he said. Stories of love and loss, of mystery and magic, of gods and monsters and ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Would you like to hear one? The young man's eyes lit up. Yes, very much. I love stories. Good, Don Miguel said warmly. Then, after you have eaten and rested, we will talk. I will tell you about this land and its legends. I will tell you about the spirits that walk beside us, the traditions that keep us connected to our ancestors, the wisdom that has been passed down through countless generations. I will tell you stories that matter, stories that teach, stories that remind us who we are and where we come from. Because that is what this inn is for, to preserve what might otherwise be forgotten, to give voice to the past, to keep the old tales alive for the future. The young man smiled, warmed already by Don Miguel's passion and welcome. I would be honored to listen, grandfather. And so, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, as the last traces of the storm evaporated in the new day's warmth, Don Miguel prepared breakfast for his new guest. He made his chocolate with care, roasting the cacao beans until they smelled of earth and heaven, grinding them with cinnamon and vanilla, whisking the mixture until it frothed. He cooked eggs and beans, toasted bread over the fire, set out fresh cheese and salsa. He worked with the contentment of a man doing what he was meant to do, serving others, creating moments of comfort and connection. When the food was ready, he brought it to the young man, who ate with the hunger of someone who had traveled far. Don Miguel sat across from him, sipping his own chocolate, waiting patiently. And when the young man had finished, had pushed back his plate with a satisfied sigh, Don Miguel leaned forward. Now then, he said, his eyes twinkling, let me tell you a story. Have you heard of La Llorona, the weeping woman who wanders the waterways searching for her lost children? The young man shook his head. No, I have not. Please tell me. Don Miguel smiled, settled into his chair, and began. This happened long ago, in the time when the Spanish had just arrived in our lands. And the cycle continued. The stories flowed like water, like blood, like time itself. From one generation to the next, from one listener to another, never quite the same, but always recognizable, always true in the ways that mattered most. The inn of forgotten tales stood solid and welcoming, its fire burning bright, its doors open to all who needed shelter, food, and stories. Don Miguel remained its guardian, its voice, its heart, and somewhere, in the space between the visible and invisible, Rosa smiled. Her husband was doing what he did best, what he was born to do, keeping the past alive, giving it to the future, one story at a time. Outside, the world turned. Seasons changed. Storms came and went. People were born. lived, died, and were remembered. And through it all, the stories persisted. La Llorona still wept by the rivers. El Chupacabra still stalked the night. The Nagual still transformed under the full moon. El Cadejo still protected travelers on lonely roads. And Quetzalcoatl still promised to return, bringing with him the golden age, the time of peace and plenty. Whether these things were literally true or not almost did not matter. They were true in the hearts of those who believed, true in the lessons they taught, true in the connections they forged between past and present, between the living and the dead, between the rational and the mysterious. They were true because they endured, because people like Don Miguel kept telling them, and people like his travelers kept listening, and people like you, dear friends, reading these words or hearing them spoken, carry them forward into tomorrow. This is the power of folklore. Not that it happened, but that it matters. Not that we can prove it, but that we feel it. Not that it is fact, but that it is truth. And so, as the sun climbed higher and the new day unfolded with all its possibilities and challenges, as the young man listened to Don Miguel's voice weaving ancient magic into the morning air, as the fire crackled and the chocolate steamed and the world outside went about its business, the stories lived. They lived in words and memory, in repetition and variation, in the countless small moments when someone says, "Let me tell you about," and another person says, "Yes, please, I would like to hear." They lived in the Inn of Forgotten Tales, and they lived in every place where people gather to share what they know, what they remember, what they believe. They lived, and they would continue to live as long as there were storytellers to tell them and listeners to receive them. And that, my dear friends, is where we will end tonight's story. I hope you have enjoyed this journey through Mexican folklore, through storms and stories, through the warm shelter of Don Miguel's inn. I hope you will remember these tales and perhaps share them with others, keeping them alive for another generation. Until next time, travel safely. Honor your ancestors, tell your stories, and remember that the world is full of mystery and magic, if only we have eyes to see it and hearts to believe it. Good night, my friends. Sweet dreams, and may El Cadejo Blanco watch over you always.